Today's session will be led by Debra Iles, the Senior Associate Dean for Executive Education at Harvard Kennedy School. Debra provides administrative leadership for all executive programs on campus, online, and offsite. She is a member of the HKS Faculty Steering Committee and the MPA Admissions Committee, as well as a leader in a university-wide initiative for professional and lifelong learners. Later in the presentation, we will also hear from Professor Christopher Robichaud. Dr. Robichaud is a senior lecturer in ethics and public policy at Harvard Kennedy School and director of pedagogical innovation at the Edmond J. Safra Center for Ethics. He received his doctorate in philosophy from MIT, and his work at the Harvard Kennedy School focuses primarily on developing ethics pedagogy for professional policymakers. He is the core head for the MPP Core Ethics Program, has led efforts to transform the ethics curriculum into a case-based and simulation-driven enterprise, and is a faculty director of executive programs, including emerging leaders and leadership and character in uncertain times. Thank you both for joining us today to discuss executive education and leadership development. Over to you, Deb.
Thank you, Laura. So leadership development really is the cornerstone of what we do here at the Kennedy School. So I'm thrilled to be able to share with you some of the latest developments. As I think most of you know, on the next slide, the Kennedy School is the leading source globally for executive education focused on the public sector, aiming to develop and support leaders for the public good. Before the pandemic, we were very proud of the over 50 programs that we offered on our campus every year. And the fact that Harvard attracted so many senior level leaders from nearly every country in the world. We were also proud of the small number of online programs that we offered. We really felt like we were pioneers in the field of online executive education. So as you all know, everything has changed. We've been fulfilling our mission of public leadership education in a completely online format for the past 20 months. Today, we're looking forward. We are coming back to campus in late January, very excited about that. And we will continue to develop and deliver terrific online programs. And most importantly, we've learned so much in the past 20 months that we really will continue to offer things that are completely different from what we used to have. We'll blend the best of what we have learned online with what we know how to do so well on campus, bringing new insights to our programs, our teaching, and our cohort engagements. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that in a minute, but I know that you're all wondering, what's it like on campus right now? The full-time students have been back on campus since August of 2021. They've been here all through the fall. The campus is really bustling. There is an exciting community spirit of collaboration, impactful learning, safety, and pure joy just at being together, something we probably took somewat for granted in the past. One of the funny quotes we talk about a lot on campus now is "Mask what you can do for your country," quoting John F. Kennedy. As far as COVID safety, Harvard has robust science-based protocols in place, including masking indoors, ways in which we interact, a regular cadence of testing for the whole community, students, faculty, and staff, and the whole community has really embraced this. Throughout the entire semester, we have seen no transmission of COVID-19 in our classrooms, and we plan to remain vigilant as we welcome Exec Ed back to campus. So we hope to see you on campus soon, and we want you to know that we will insist on sustaining our protocols. It's worked so well for us. You can inform yourselves about what to expect by checking the FAQs on our website, and those FAQs are updated frequently. And we will modify our protocols and approaches as time passes based on the science, but for the moment, if you're thinking of coming back to a campus, you should expect to be masked and tested and have a fantastic time. So let me turn to the incredible array of leadership learning choices that have blossomed in Exec Ed. As I mentioned, we've redesigned and optimized most of our programs at this point for online impact, and we've also added new online programs. We're deep in discussions with the faculty about this next phase. And so what that means is for each program and with each faculty chair, we're considering the target audience, the core learning objectives, and we're deciding whether the program should remain online, whether it should return to campus. In some cases, we'll be blending both together, so some online components and some on-campus components. And in a few cases, we'll actually be offering side-by-side programs. So for example, a person could attend a program in April on campus, and the same program will be offered in September online, just as an example. So this is great. It offers a broader array of programs. It does put the onus for finding the right program for you right back on you. So I want to give you some help in how to think about that. But one thing that you can really be sure of is that all of our Kennedy School programs, regardless of whether they're on campus or online, are led by Harvard faculty. They're interactive and engaging. They're cohort driven, so you will have that terrific opportunity to network with people like yourself from all over the world. They're designed for impact, built on research, and focused on the public good. So as you think about what's best for you and what path might you follow, we really ask you to consider 3 core questions. What kind of learner are you? What kind of learning really stimulates your growth? What kind of leader do you aspire to be? And what kind of moment is this? And I mean that for your community, your organization, your country. What do you really need right now? So I'd like to give you a few examples of how you might map our programs to your goals using those questions. So the first example is, you might be thinking, I'm a senior executive, I'm focused on leadership skills, but my organization is facing tough, specific challenges right now, and I need to be very targeted in how I explore and learn. So we do have programs within our leadership framework that are focused on specific challenges. And on this slide that you can see here, this is just a few examples. So on campus, we have a program called Leadership in Crises. This program has been with us for a long time, but it certainly has additional resonance today. We have an on-campus program, we will have an on-campus program of leadership decision-making, which is focused on eliminating and reducing bias in decision-making. There's strategic management and regulatory and enforcement agencies. And there's strategies for leading diverse organizations. We really need to thrive in our whole organization. Online, we have a few programs. These are just a few. First one is leading through the changing media landscape. This is a brand new program. It's intensive, and it's focused on companies and organizations and leaders who really have a public-facing role and need to interface with media and understand how it affects their goals. Promoting racial equity in the workplace, leading economic growth, and nonprofit leadership and management. Lots and lots of choices. As another example, maybe you are a mid-career public servant and you're looking to refresh your skills after these crazy past 2 years. You need to refresh your perspective, update your toolkit, and refocus on what drew you to public service in the first place. Here are a couple of programs that take that sort of more generalized approach. The first one on this list is Leadership for the 21st Century. And I'll just add that that is our first program that's coming back to campus in January. We're very excited. Senior Executive Fellows, another long-standing program, but this is one where we'll be offering it on campus, and we will also continue to offer a version of SEF online. There's senior leaders in state and local government coming back, senior managers in government, and women in power. These are all more kind of general leadership programs. Online, we'll have a version of leadership decision-making. And this slide talks about intensive and extended programs. So let me explain a little bit about that. An intensive program is one that's really quite short. And the expectation is that all of the learners will be stepping away from their jobs and will be fully engaged in the program while it's running. And they're usually a week or two. The Women Leading Change is an extended program. An extended program is one where the same type of learning is stretched over a much longer time. And the idea there is that the learners will be able to learn some new tools, bring them back to their work and try them out in practice, and then come back to the program and really kind of iterate through what they're learning and what's working and deepen the learning in that way. The third program listed there is Strategic Leadership. This is a brand new program that focuses on enhancing personal effectiveness. So that's a second batch of examples. And then the final example that I'll share is more focused on if you're an emerging or early mid-career level leader, and you're trying to bring your skills to the next level, you're open to new learning formats, the idea of learning from home appeals to you, works for you. And then also, I want to talk in this slide a little bit about the potential challenge of getting your organization to fund leadership development right now, because that is a challenge for many. I just want to say as an aside that our online programs are typically about half the price of our on-campus programs. And that's because on-campus programs include housing, catering, and other amenities of campus life. So we've really actually worked hard to make our online leadership development courses more affordable, to be more inclusive, and expand the reach of who can access learning at the Kennedy School. So for this type of emerging leader or early mid-career leader, a couple of places where you might want to look are Emerging Leaders, the program, one of the programs that Chris leads, and he'll talk more about that in a moment, Leadership for the 21st Century. And then, of course, online, we have really lots of options. Leadership and Character in Uncertain Times is another of Chris Robichaux's programs, and that's an extended program. So again, an opportunity to learn, work, iterate, learn, work, really deepen the learning. There's Women Leading Change, Leadership, Organizing and Action, Leading Economic Growth, and again, Strategic Leadership. So the message I want to leave you with is really this. We've invested in our programs over the past 2 years. We have more options for you to consider, and that's a good thing. I can't really address your specific targeted needs in a webinar like this, but I do encourage you to take a stroll through the website. And please note that on the website, every program has a program director listed. They are real people. Many of them are on the call today. And they would be delighted to hear from you and help you think through and navigate the choices that are there. Okay, my last slide. These are just some of the outstanding faculty members who lead executive leadership programs at the Kennedy School. We are so proud of their scholarship, their commitment to bringing practical knowledge to bear in the real world. I think probably many of you on this call know some of these folks. They're just wonderful people. And we're lucky to have one of them with us today, and that's Chris Robichaud. So Laura already shared a summary of Chris's bio for you. And I've already mentioned that he chairs 2 terrific programs, Emerging Leaders and Leadership and Character in Uncertain Times. I want to say he's also a terrific colleague. He's a shining light in the field. Chris is someone who brings deep insight into the ethics and the morality of aspiring to leadership and also to being a leader. So I'll turn it over to Chris now, and he can share a few of his own reflections. And thank you very much, Chris.
Thanks, Deb, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I just want to talk a little bit about some of my experiences during the past 18 months and my experiences in part about the transition from online back to in-person, and share those with you, and then we'll open it up for some questions. So one of the things, I just want to start with, one of the things that I learned intimately over the past 18 months has been the real importance of being willing to put into practice what it is that you preach. And by that, I mean that many of our leadership offerings Leadership in the 21st Century, Emerging Leaders, Leadership and Character in Uncertain Times, and others, really emphasize the adaptive nature of leadership challenges, not just sticking with something that you're used to, but being willing to experiment and innovate and throw things at the wall and see what sticks. And it's often easy to say that, it's harder to do. But one of the things that I have learned over the past 18 months is doing it is really, really essential. That is what all of us here on this call and all of you listening to it have been doing. We are in other words, a leadership moment. We are in a global and domestic, personal, and team and organizational leadership moment. And so I like to use the moment that we're in as a case in point to examine some leadership ideas. So I think a general idea here is one of the things that I have learned, and a really important lesson, is not to shy away from the moment that we're in, but rather to lean into it and to cultivate it for examples, to cultivate it as a case in point for exploration of leadership studies. I do believe sincerely that there's a lot of different opportunities for leadership in the current moment, and the current moment seems like is going to be extended for some time. So I just wanted to start with that and just recognize that all of you listening today are interested in leadership training, and as someone devoted to teaching leadership, we shouldn't ignore the fact that we have, in some sense, though there's plenty of differences, a shared case that we are all working on, which is how to manage this moment for ourselves, in our families, in our teams, in our organizations, in our countries, and globally. And we should be happy to use that and to interrogate it and to learn from it. A couple of other things that I learned, some of which I'm sure is not going to be surprising to you, but it's worth mentioning all the same. I learned that online leadership education can go a lot stronger and a lot better than I may have imagined at first. And I was very optimistic about it. But I do think it's worth saying that our pivot online, both at the Kennedy School and elsewhere, and the students' pivot online was extremely smooth. And we saw that there were plenty of interesting opportunities for learning in the online space. It's again an example of, we're used to this one thing, here's something new, oh no, what can possibly be done? A lot can possibly be done in this space. And I think that we should all be enthusiastic and excited about just what's possible with online education in leadership. So as Deb mentioned, one of the courses that I offer is called Leadership and Character in Uncertain Times. It's entirely an online offering. And among the things that I was most happy about was its reach. In other words, there were lots of folks who probably would never be able to get to campus for a week or so, who were able to come into this course and share their experiences and learn from others. And that's wonderful. There's also a great opportunity in the extended model, which is what I offer, to really explore an idea over time, to let it sink in, to mull it over, to visit it and revisit it as well. And that's something that you often don't get in an in-person setting. So that's another thing that I think is a real advantage to online learning. And it also just allows you a little bit more balance. You don't have to interrupt your entire life in order to go into the online, in order to do the learning that you want to do. So a learning lesson was that online leadership studies has a tremendous amount to offer, and some things that I'm really excited that we'll be continuing even when we all do extend our on-campus presence, because there's a lot of richness there. What I also learned over the past 18 months, and I say this having just finished up a semester of in-person teaching, is to quote Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, there's no place like home, right? There really is a lot of good to be accomplished back in person, even if we are all masked. And I say this to you sincerely. My course this semester was a course that I offered both jointly at the Harvard Kennedy School and at the Harvard College. It was 250 students. It was huge lecture hall. Everyone was masked. I was masked. But the energy in that room, the enthusiasm, not just to be back, but the things that you forgot existed, the good, productive learning tensions that emerge. People, turning around and pointing to another person saying, I want to disagree with that, or I want to agree with that. These sorts of things live and breathe in an in-person setting, and there really is no online substitute for it. So where we might have been resistant to online learning at first, and the takeaway for me was, we shouldn't have been resistant. None of us should be resistant. It's awesome. Now the thought might be, why go back to in-person teaching? I've gotten used to this. My goodness, it's been 18, 19, 20 months and counting. But the answer to that really is there is still plenty of good pedagogical learning to happen in the in-person space. Just to give you one example of that, I teach a lot with simulations. And some of my simulations can go on for an hour or so. Some of my simulations can go on for the entirety of a day. I panicked when we moved online. I wondered whether I could put any simulations into the online space. We did. It's been very well received. But there's nothing quite like an in-person simulation, especially in the space of leadership, where you want to raise the temperature in the room a little bit. You want to feel the anxiety of really, really hard decisions. I mean, this is what leadership is about. It's not supposed to be passive. It's supposed to be leaning into really hard choices. That can't quite be replicated in the online space. There's a tremendous amount of good that can happen with everyone together, feeling that tension, feeling that anxiety, leaning into the problem, coming up with successes on the other side of it. And I give you that as just one example of something that did have to remain off the table for online learning, but that's really, really important, I think, for leadership studies overall. And it's only going to be captured with in-person training. Similarly, one of the courses that Deb mentioned, and I've mentioned it already, Leadership in the 21st Century. This is the kind of program that really exploits the classroom as its own case study, just like we are all in our own case study. And that can only be done so much in the online space. It can be done in the online space. It's been successfully done in the online space. But again, there's nothing quite like feeling it in person. Not to mention all of the really important things that come out of conversations in the hallway, conversations over lunch, walking around Cambridge during the months when it's pleasant, and even during the months when it's not pleasant. Winter clothes here work 6 months out of the year, and tackling ideas, going over things again with colleagues. Those sorts of in-person experiences really do tether people together, build relationships that then can last the rest of a lifetime, and can't quite exist in the same way in the online space. So my lessons were broadly, we can do a lot more online than we ever thought, and it's definitely worth pursuing and keeping as something that we offer. And it, in some ways, for some people, is the ideal choice. But also, we shouldn't shy away from returning again in person. The classroom, the physical classroom, really can't be replaced for a lot of kind of leadership studies, and we should lean into that and enjoy it as well. My approach to, I'm just going to say a few other things and then we'll open it up for questions. My approach to teaching in these different environments, the first thing for me is, and I hope it comes across here, I really want to make sure that I maintained energy in both spaces. I really believe in energetically teaching. It's not everyone's style, doesn't need to be everyone's style, but it's my style. And I didn't want to lose that when sitting in front of sitting in front of a computer. So for me, it's very important to maintain a certain degree of energy. And that's something that I approached all of my, course design with, is making sure that there was energy both coming from me, but also in student interactions, making sure that there were opportunities for students to really interrogate each other, whether they're in the classroom or in person. And so I just offer that to you as something that I've been working on myself in thinking about how to do that. In the spirit of that, what am I hearing from participants in executive education programs? And I'll broaden that to what am I hearing from learners in general. What I'm hearing mirrors what I've just mentioned, which is a lot of folks are surprised at how much quality learning they were able to absorb in the online space, happily surprised. Also really open to pursuing that in the future, but also really hungry for first person, interpersonal learning to return. I can't tell you how many students on campus this year have just come up to me and others and been like, "I'm so happy we're all back. I'm so happy this is going on." As Deb mentioned, our campus is really quite beautiful, and it feels safe and it feels good, and that can't really be captured unless you're on it and learning. So I'm going to wrap things up there, and I'm happy to answer more questions as well. But I think the takeaway for all of us, from my perspective, is online learning is here to stay, and it should be, right? It should be not merely because it's a convenience for some, even though it is, because it offers some really interesting pedagogical opportunities. It offers some great learning possibilities. But in-person learning is here to stay as well. And if the past semester has been any indication, there's tremendous amount of enthusiasm and great learning upshot, especially in the space of leadership, by getting back in person and wrestling with these ideas in a physical classroom. So with that, I hope I've said enough to get the ball rolling and to give you some things to think about. Let's open up for questions.
Thanks, Chris. So we have a question from someone who is interested in learning a little bit more about the demographics for emerging leaders and leadership and character in uncertain times. If you could speak to that just a little bit.
Sure, I'll speak to it anecdotally, and I don't know if some of the others on this call have the actual numbers, but one of the things that I adore in both leadership and character in uncertain times and emerging leaders is just how many countries are represented in those classrooms. I want to say dozens and dozens and dozens. I would love to give you an actual number, and maybe someone can come up with that. But what we do at the beginning of those programs is we go around very, very briefly and introduce ourselves and introduce, where learners are from, both in their country and also in their profession. And by the end of it, everyone has nothing to say because they realize that they're sitting in a room that is so globally represented. And one of the things that I really feel is important in my classrooms is to emphasize that the learning here is not just from me to folks, but it's from learners learning from each other and using their own experiences. And that can go a little way in a fairly narrow group, but in the leadership courses that I offer, the leadership programs that I offer, we have a wide range of different experiences represented from different countries that always leads to really rich and interesting conversations, serious disagreements, often that surface when discussing a case or when going through a simulation. But I love disagreement. I get really worried if everyone's nodding along saying the exact same thing. So I think that it's a great learning environment. I'm sure that those specific numbers can be given to you, but my anecdotal evidence is that the numbers are quite high. I'm probably lowballing it if I say a couple dozen. It's probably more than that. And I want it to remain that way. I really want these programs to be widely opened and to have folks from all over the world come to them and enjoy learning together.
Thank you. We've also had a few questions about one of our programs, Leadership in the 21st Century. We have the program director here, Caitlin Marquardon, who's going to speak for just a minute about the program. Thanks, Caitlin.
Thanks, Laura. So the Leadership for the 21st Century program, it's really one of our most diverse programs demographically, I would say, because the participants' own professional challenges and experience are really critical to the learning process. We choose a class that is professionally and geographically diverse. The program's typically more than 50% or 50% or more international participants and 50% US. Just looking at the upcoming class, we have participants coming from more than 35 countries from across continents. They also come from across sectors. So, we are the Kennedy School of Government, but we have people come into this program from the private sector, from corporations, from the public sector, and also from nonprofit programs as well. So the key element of this program is really the personal leadership challenges that we ask participants to bring to the program. So we ask them to bring something that they are currently facing and working on that doesn't have a simple technical solution. And we use the adaptive leadership framework throughout the week to help them work through their challenges, and they will be placed in, we'll do that in the larger classrooms, and then they'll also be placed in small working groups where they will give each other feedback and consult on each other's leadership challenges, and that hopefully by the end of the week that they will have some clear path steps to take forward to move them closer to tackling that challenge that they have. So happy to talk more about that if anyone has any specific questions about leadership for the 21st century. Thanks.
Thanks, Caitlin. There are a few people interested in learning a bit more about our executive certificate. Deb, could you talk about that for just a second?
Sure. And of course, I always refer everyone to the website because that's where all the details are laid out. But we have 4 different executive certificates available: public leadership, policy, economic development, and nonprofit leadership. Those are the 4. And each of those has kind of a list of programs that are under that rubric. And participants are invited to take a series of 3 courses within that and pull them together to be an executive certificate. So it's sort of a series of programs. There's a lot of flexibility and freedom to choose the programs that make the most sense for the person who's for the participant. We've given this has been a really successful program. I think one thing that makes us incredibly proud is that when people come to a program at the Kennedy School, they always want to come to another one. And so the series certificate, the executive certificate, has enabled folks to put together a learning journey that makes sense for them and to come back. And this is another area where the explosion in online options has also been really helpful in people being able to complete that work in spite of the pandemic. I guess I don't know what the specific question was because I didn't see it, but if there are any specifics, I'd be happy to address them. I did see one question that was like, are we considering extending the 3 years? I think there's a 3-year limit for when the person has to complete all 3 programs. And at the moment, we're not considering extending that because we have so many online options, but that is something that we can certainly take as a suggestion and consider.
6 year, just to be clear, it's a 6-year time frame. Yeah.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah. Okay, please remember to put any questions you have in the Q&A function. Somebody wants to know, is it necessary to enroll in one of our courses before taking the course? Yes, everybody must apply and be admitted to the courses before you can begin taking the course.
Laura, if I could add to that,
Sure.
we do have an admissions process. So yeah, as Laura said, you need to apply and you need to be admitted before coming to the course. The criteria that we will use to make those admissions decisions are also listed on the website, but they basically just have to do with the level of professional achievement that you've reached. We do not look at educational attainment for the programs. We look at professional achievement. And so, and the reason we do that is to create the cohorts that make the most sense so that people are in a meaningful peer group. But I encourage everyone to apply because I think one of the things that I think a lot about is sometimes people think, oh gosh, Harvard is so prestigious. I think I'm worried that I won't be admitted. And I think we are entirely focused on professional match and not on some of the other criteria that you might be worried about. So apply.
If I could jump in and talk a little bit about the certificates and also just the importance, maybe not so much about the certificates, but the importance of being open, I think, to taking a few different leadership offerings. One of the things that I love about teaching with my colleagues is no one goes around thinking that they have the final word on what leadership is. The study of leadership doesn't lend itself to a nice, clean definition. This is what leadership is and everything else isn't. I think it's really important for professionals to be exposed to many different ways of approaching leadership training and being open to different kinds of ways. So leadership in the 21st century, which some of you just asked about, that is very much about personal leadership challenges, as you heard, about problems that don't lend themselves to technical solutions, about wrestling with the awkwardness and challenge of having to experiment with solutions. Contrast that to something like my colleague and dear friend Jen Lerner offers with leadership and decision making, where there the focus is on what the behavioral sciences can tell us about eliminating biases and other really, really useful information about how our brains work to bring into leadership practice. Compare that to some of the work that I do, which is to put leadership into conversation with ethics. These are all really fascinating dimensions to leadership, and no one program has captured the real estate on it. And that's a good and healthy thing. So as some of you think about the kind of leadership work that you want to do, I think you should be really open to experimenting with different ways of thinking about leadership and different kinds of practices. And when you look at our leadership's offerings, you're going to see different faculty approach it in different ways, all of which can come together into a really interesting package for you to pick and choose what you think really resonates with your leadership challenges. So I just felt it was important to throw that out there. as you think about where to go.
Thanks, Chris. Somebody wants to know if any of our certificate courses are blended virtual and in person.
I'm happy to take that one. Yes. The one that comes to mind right away is implementing public policy, which we didn't mention earlier today because it's not specifically a leadership course, but it's a fantastic course. I see Amber Thatcher is with us. She's the program director for that course, and may have more to offer. But this is a program where people come in with specific policy ideas that they are trying to implement. There's a component on campus, there's a component online, and they work together for months and months and really share a lot of progress on how they're doing. I'm going to turn it over to Amber, who will be much more articulate in describing the details.
Sure, thanks, Deb. Yes, for the Implementing Public Policy program, although not technically a leadership program, we do definitely address a lot of leadership challenges and needs for leadership when implementing public policy. So it does have a leadership component to it. We do spend about a month and a half online doing work together, and then a week on campus, and then 5 months online together after the on-campus portion of the program that's really focused on action learning and taking what you learn in the classroom and online and applying it to your specific implementation challenge that you are working on and you bring to the program. It is very much action learning driven. There's a lot of great content that's delivered both asynchronously, live online, and live in the HKS classroom. But it is definitely one of our, a program that is a little different than most of our others in our portfolio, and that you have this extended learning experience and really get to try things out in real time and immediately in your work. So happy to answer any other questions that people have about it.
So that's a great summary, Amber. And that's a program that we had actually designed and built before the pandemic. So I just want to say we've had a lot of success with that program. It's been terrific. And I do anticipate that as we settle in and we have more programs coming back to campus, that our faculty chairs will want to continue to explore adding online components to their on-campus programs. And and even right away, one thing that we plan to do immediately and probably forever is that all of our on-campus programs will be preceded by kind of an online orientation. And the reason for this is because we really want people to arrive on campus, knowing what to expect and ready to learn. We don't want to spend that valuable time together on campus just kind of talking about the rules of the road. This is obviously especially important during this sort of waning part, I'm say that optimistically, the waning part of the pandemic, because we do need to set expectations around masking and all those important safety protocols. But I think we will continue to do this forever. It's just efficient and works really, really well. It gets a lot of kind of questions out, kind of as we're doing right now, and it just enables people to just get a running start.
Okay, thank you. Can you talk about what types of teaching methodologies you found translate well into the online environment?
Sure. So I actually think quite a few translate well. The one that actually doesn't translate as well, which may be surprising, is just straight up lecturing. And that's because it is often quite a bit of a challenge to just sit and listen and absorb for hours and hours and hours. So I think that what I have found translates well is something that I did in the classroom for many, many, many years, which is you talk a little bit and then you put people into groups and they talk a little bit amongst themselves, and then you come back and you share what it is that you've come up with together. That translated very well online. I think most people do that now for extended periods of time in online learning. But I think it's important to remember that was a practice that was not just designed for Zoom. That was a practice that was designed beforehand, thinking about how to keep people engaged and interested. A little bit of content, a small discussion, and a small group about it. Come back and pick at the content again. So one thing that I found is that model in the classroom and outside of the classroom works very works well. I will say in general, small group discussions works well, whether it's put into that specific context or not. You can still see each other, you can still engage each other. There's a lot of really interesting learning that can emerge in that way. I found that encouraging participation, the equivalent of raised hands, but on chat, that also can work very well. I'll tell you that it's sometimes really hard for folks to raise their hand, in a class and volunteer something. It's easier for them to write something to the chat that you can then come back to. And so I think that for me, as someone who outside of online learning was really trying to get people to be involved in the conversation, the chat function or Q&A, or just having yourself in a queue, you don't have to hold your hand up anymore. You can just raise your hand and there it is. These are wonderful inventions. In fact, I'm going out of my way to see how I can bring them into in-person learning, because they really help people feel that they have a way to participate in the ongoing conversation with an easier lift than before. So I would mention those as just a couple. I do think that, as I mentioned this before, there's certain kinds of simulations that can also translate pretty well into the online space, and others that can't. I mean, you're not going to find that everything translates perfectly, but there's a kind of simulations that focuses on, a small group having to make some tough decisions over a certain period of time. You can do that fairly well online as well. So I hope that gives you some sense of what I think is some good translation from one to the other.
Thanks, Chris. We have someone who's interested in the climate change and energy program that's happening in March. We have both Ariana Diaz on the call and Caitlin Marquardant, who Ariana is the current director and Caitlin has directed it before. Could one of you speak to this program and how it fits into the larger HKS program lineup? Maybe go over the curriculum a little bit, some highlights.
Hello. Yes, I can talk about the climate change and energy program. This is a program where you will understand the basis of the scientific nature of climate change, causes and consequences, the economics underlying effective policy to address climate change, and a lot of mitigation policy. We are very excited to be able to offer this program again in person. We do have an online alternative of the program, which is the climate change policy program.
Do you want to talk about the difference between those two briefly, please?
Sure. So the climate change and policy is a 1-week intensive online program. It's mostly about the mitigation policy and understanding. It would be kind of an introduction to understand climate change. The climate change and energy program is in person and provides an opportunity to go more into the energy aspect of climate change, the nature of the transformation of energy systems that are required to mitigate climate change. So I think that's the difference. You could take the climate change policy program online and come back to take the climate change and energy in person.
Thank you, Ariana. So someone is wondering that English is not their first language and if there's any testing requirements to enroll in a course.
I'm happy to answer that question. There are no testing requirements in the sense of a TOEFL or an Iles test of English language competence, but the programs are taught in English. The readings are in English, and being able to participate in the class is a really important part of the learning experience. So I would really encourage people who are thinking about applying to really feel that they're going to be confident in their ability to participate in discussions in English during the program.
Yes, agree. And there are people, as Chris mentioned, from all over the world who attend with many different native languages, and we always figure out a way to make it work. So for programs that are running on campus, someone is wondering about library accessibility and whether they will have access to the Harvard and Kennedy School libraries.
Kennedy School Library for sure.
Mm-hmm.
The Harvard libraries, I actually don't know the answer to that question in the current moment because there has been so much change around COVID access. So I don't know the answer to that question. Normally the answer would be yes. Not sure right now. If anybody on this call from my team does know the answer to that question, I hope you, looks like Horace might. He's just unmuted himself. So let's hear what Horace has to say on that.
Hi. You do have access to the Kennedy School Library if you're here on campus, and there are 2 terminals there that allow you access to all the databases that the Harvard faculty use to do research. So while you're on campus, as long as you get to one of those 2 terminals, you can access all sorts of research materials. The library staff, the research librarians, will be more than happy to help you. They have been very helpful to many of our participants in the past. So you can set up meetings with them and they can help you find materials, and they can also find ways for you to access books, as many of them free, in your local communities, no matter where you are. They're very resourceful, and I recommend you visiting them, and they're always happy to help executive education participants.
Thank you, Horace. 1 second while I pull up the next question. Can you talk about, Deb, you did touch on this a little bit, but can you talk about some of the highlights of the on-campus experience and what is remaining from our before COVID times?
Sure. Well, the classrooms are fantastic, and I think Chris has covered that quite a bit. So that is the core. The rest of the, Cambridge is a really nice place to visit. The whole campus is bustling and live, as it has always been. You know, the college, the other surrounding graduate schools. We will be housing our cohorts of executive program participants at the DoubleTree Hotel, as we have for the past several years. That's a hotel that's just about a mile from the Kennedy School's main campus. It's right on the Charles River. It has a lovely commanding view of Boston and Cambridge, and the cohorts will all be housed there together. So there's opportunity for, some fellowship and some networking to continue to happen after hours. Most of the restaurants and bars and museums and those kinds of things are open. Most of them do have mask requirements. So again, I hate to just be talking about COVID all the time, but that's where we are right now. So definitely plan to wear a mask, bring your vaccination card, because a lot of venues will require to see the card on entrance today. That may change, but that's how it is today. We're going to continue to serve meals together with some guidance about just how to stay safe while eating with a group. I guess I'm trying to think of what else is, I'm very happy to be back in my office. There might be other things that I'm not thinking of, or maybe deeper aspects of the question, but other than the fact that people are wearing masks and there's this terrific focus on testing and on vaccination, life does continue to feel really quite normal here. So I hope I've addressed that.
I thought I might piggyback off of that, Deb, if that's okay. And something I don't think I covered entirely before, and it is, I think, a little bit deeper and maybe a little bit harder to nail down, but this is the way that I would put it. Often when learners come here for an executive education program, the process of coming here, of entering this area, of being surrounded by Harvard and Cambridge, locks you in to a learning mode that is very hard to replicate when you're at home doing lots of other things as well, even if you're doing this a lot. We are responsive to our environment, and Cambridge screams education. I think there's someone actually outside that does scream it. I'm kidding. There's not, but you can't throw a stone and not hit a university, library, students bustling around. The Kennedy School itself is a gorgeous campus. There really is something to be said about removing yourself from your ordinary environment, planting yourself into a new area for a short, concentrated period of time, surrounded by learning, surrounded by fellow people who are just as excited about learning as you are, and locking yourself in and just absorbing everything and then returning home again. I think that there's, it's not necessary for everyone. People can lock in sometimes without having to do that. But I believe a lot of folks really do enjoy that portion of the experience. And it's something that when we're all at home all the time, even if the learning is really interesting and exciting, we can't quite concentrate and lock in the way that we can when we're in a specific space for a specific amount of time, like the on-campus experience. So that's harder to name with fancier words, but I think it's very real as someone who takes quite seriously the experiential component to all sorts of learning. And so I don't think that should be ignored as one of the chief advantages of returning to campus for the learning.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a great note for us to end on. Thank you both for joining us today to discuss executive education and leadership development.